Hi, Miranda.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for joining us this morning for Thrive. It is such a pleasure to have you. How are you
Oh,
doing today?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I was actually just sharing, I just love the whole idea of the period lab and what you just started with that, because I feel like that, just the name being so clever, but also having a relatable way to talk about these things. And um, before anything, I love to start off just by asking where you're at right now and what has been the biggest blessing for you thus far throughout this pandemic experience.
Mm, that is a great question. And funny enough, that question is not asked a lot. So, similar to you, I was able to create and blossom through this whole pandemic. And I know that it was very challenging for a lot of people. But if I did not have this time, if I didn't have to completely switch gears on my whole entire business plan and move homes and all this stuff, I wouldn't be here. And funny enough, I've been wanting to do this for so long. And I've only ever been rejected. I've been told not to do this. I've been told it's a terrible business idea to focus on women and their cycles and to not ever niche so specifically. And ever since I shut the noise out and have been so focused on this, the response has been huge. So if it weren't for the pandemic, I wouldn't be here.
Wow. That's, I've heard many people tell me multiple things, but really that awareness of your own body and its cycles and its connection to nature has been a blessing to be able to witness that. And so my question to you is, why focus on the period though?
That's a great one. So I was a professional figure skater when I was in actually, by the time I was 18 is when I went pro. And that's when I just started experiencing all these hormonal issues. I was having periods for 6 weeks at a time. I was gaining weight like crazy. I actually lost, these are my real lashes, but I lost all eyelashes. My eyebrows are kind of coming back, and I've got my little hairs that are growing back, but I had no eyelashes, barely any eyebrows, losing hair like crazy. And I was literally wearing a hat all the time. I felt like I looked like a boy. I felt like I didn't have my own identity. And it was all because my hormones were just so out of whack. And I was dieting and I was trying to eat right. I was counting my calories and I was just told to be put on birth control. I was dealing with all these mood fluctuations. They were so determined to not check my hormones that they even tested me for brain tumors. They did the full CAT scan, but they didn't want to question what was going on with my hormones because they just wanted to put me on birth control. So I was just so fed up with it after talking to all the naturopaths and nutritionists and trainers and doctors that were out there. Took myself through schooling while I was still on tour. And eventually, I just wanted to leave that quality of life. It wasn't a great quality of life for me being on tour. All the drinking and the partying and then the skating and the long hours and everything like that. So decided to focus on my own health. And as soon as other women found out what I was doing, literally it was 5 days before my next tour. My company had already bought my passport, my ticket, my hotel. And I said goodbye because I had a bunch of women that were just saying hey, we're willing to pay if you're able to help us. And I started off with 3 clients and then slowly opened up my clinic, and just from there just kind of snowballed. And now years later, after shutting out the noise and having the blessing of the pandemic, we're here, and literally I just wanted to do all of this for my own health.
We have a period lab that's a safe space. Let's just talk about that. That is the biggest thing that I find incredible. I can't imagine being a performer essentially and having to perform not only as an athlete but as a human, and then also this thing being a woman that has a monthly, it's just funny to me how it's monthly basis that we deal with this cycle and natural rhythm, yet we're so disconnected. Is that something that you resonate with?
Totally. So what a lot of us don't understand is that we have two innate clocks. We've got the circadian cycle, which is your sleep wake cycle. It's something that also men connect with. It's when you fall asleep, when you wake up, it connects to your temperature, connects to your metabolism. It connects when you are the most reactive to when you're the slowest. We all have that as human beings, but being a female, by design, we are so incredibly efficient because we have the hormonal cycle. We have our infradian cycle, which connects our metabolism, our brain, our immune system, our microbiome, our stress response, and our reproductive system. There's these 6 different systems that are in our body that our hormones literally control. Mm-hmm. So if I'm trying to be the best skater that I can be and the best performer that I can possibly be, but my hormones are out of whack, I'm not going to be able, like, I literally cannot be my best self when my hormones are out of whack. That's literally science right there for you. Doesn't matter how hard you train, eventually your hormones are just going to catch up to you. And that's what was happening to me. So just to think about like athletes overall, like that's a conversation that is not discussed enough. How so many female athletes have a period that's out of whack or don't have a period at all. And then, okay, you are no longer an athlete. You want to have a family. You fast forward and trying to get pregnant, but you're not ovulating. We're not identifying how, whether you're an athlete or not, we're not identifying that our history has such an impact on our future. Nobody talks about this.
Oh my God. That is the one realization this year. How come it was birth control pills that was the answer?
That's a great question. So birth control was started way back when the church was still very influential for women to menstruate. And it's just so funny that the church was even a part of this. Like, you still need to be able to have a period. And that was something that the church really wanted by design. They didn't want to like completely take that out. So way back when, the church was constantly influencing this for us. We just naturally had this contraceptive experience that took away all menstruation as much as possible. And at no point were there really like any solid studies that were done on how to improve the female hormones. Funny enough, there was like all these studies that were actually done on men, and all these male study participants still suffered from mood changes and acne and even suppressed fertility post-trial. And these side effects were also viewed by researchers and experts that completely halt the study. And they decided to take us out as women, the women who are menstruating, the women that are still going through these cycles, because we're so unpredictable.
Okay.
How does that make sense?
I mean, to unpack this is unreal, because I have a perspective for education in which it's also highly dominated from the perspective of punishment, behavior, and reward. And with my Ayurvedic background, you know, it's essential that a practitioner asks you the 4 pillars of health that are foundational to Ayurveda, and that relates to sleep, digestion, elimination, and menstruation. And so I'm just like really loving that you had caught on to that piece and made mention of it, because it really has a mass effect on, like, we just started to reduce the tax on tampons, didn't we? Like, isn't that a recent thing? Like, I'm noticing there's so much that we're unaware of. And I wanted to know, when it comes to female hormones, what was it just specifically, if you can remember, that made you realize that it was this thing that was affecting the rest of everything else that was going on?
I don't know if I can fully remember the exact moment, but it definitely came down to once I got the period that was 6 weeks long under control, everything else kind of followed. The hair started to come back. My eyelashes were coming back. I was finally getting back to like a healthier weight that I could manage. I wasn't just fluctuating like crazy. That's what a lot of us are not fully embracing and understanding, that if you focus on your period first and foremost, everything will follow. But we do everything so opposite. We're so focused on losing weight or getting all the hair extensions and eyelashes and everything like that. But like, if you literally just take care of your hormones, all of that stuff will follow.
Yes.
Right? So it's insane how we've just been so pressured, and we've been under this belief that that suffering is part of being a woman, and then we tolerate it more than we should. And instead of having a zero tolerance policy on bad feelings in our bodies, we accept, and we don't deserve all these side effects any more than men do. So I'm glad to see that there's so many people that are now starting to have like the bigger reaction that like enough is enough kind of thing. And we're demanding to be taken seriously. The less tax on the tampons, that's huge. When I see tampons in women's bathrooms now, like in a basket there, like just to take, like that literally fills my cup. Like that is huge. That's everything.
Yeah. I love what you had said there, because I also get the warm feelings as well that, you know, like these are, there's even been controversial things, just not to derail it, but to bring it back, is I remember even on social media that posts would be taken off because women would be posting about their period. And there was a real protest about that. I just wanted to know your thoughts.
Yeah, totally. Who's the poet that yeah, like that was huge.
Yes.
And I actually had just done another interview where I was relating to that. Her and also like other athletes are starting to show up and just say like, hey, this is completely normal. And just the fact that we are constantly censored, it breaks my heart. It's so insane. Like now I'm starting to see all these women that are posting pictures naked, but they have the men's chest in front of them. Just that one difference, that one thing that can't be shown. There's no acceptance of our bodies. And this is something that's starting in our homes right from childhood. There's no acceptance through our parents. There's no acceptance for us growing, and there's no acceptance for us to talk about this when we're in school, when we need it the most. Like imagine in years from now, imagine your daughter having her first period and she's able to walk into her doctor and her doctor says, okay, here's what's going on with your period.
Yes.
These are your symptoms that you might be experiencing. This is what to pay attention to. This is what's common. This is what is not normal. Here's how to fix it. Like, imagine if we had that amount of support. There's classes in, I believe it's in Southeast Asia. Like, girls in grade 3 are learning about endometriosis. In grade 3, are learning about the most intense hormonal condition of estrogen dominance. And women in Canada, I've got 45 and 55-year-old women that are reaching out to me and they're like, I'm just learning this for the first time. Right?
I have to mention how just incredible it was for me to witness the culture. It's a real cultural understanding and ideology around this, that women are still overworking their bodies. during their periods.
Mm-hmm.
And when I really deep dived into where is this coming from, that we feel like we have to push our bodies when it's literally purifying itself for creation, a natural process. Why are we unable to honor the body?
That's a great point. We're so living in the male world, in the hustle, hustle, hustle state, which is great. That's the masculine. We need to have masculine, absolutely, but we also need to have the feminine. But that is not something that the world has identified that we needed. You know, you've got your plants in the background. I'm surrounded by nature. I literally left the city of hustle in Toronto and living up in Muskoka. That has been huge for me, because it's just such a different shift in energy. But trying to get a lot of women to literally stop and have a sip of water, stop and go breathe for a second, stop and go eat, stop and look at your period. That is not something that we have been practicing. Give yourself some rest when you are menstruating. It's so funny because I even did an interview with Dr. Brandon Marcello. He is a high performance strategist for the Olympics, military, and Stanford University. As a man, he has been trying to convince women since the 1990s, I think it's 98, trying to get women to understand to train in sync with their cycle, because he understands that you can train harder and recover faster. Yet women are so convinced that they need to live in this man's world to ignore all that. It's a hustle. Do it in just the circadian cycle way, not in the female cycle way. So we're becoming more sick than ever. We're dealing with more hormonal conditions, more diseases, burnout like crazy. It's something that's not natural for our bodies. And your period, which is your monthly analysis, it's literally your free lab data, is telling you, hey, babe, this is not working for me. And it tells you every single period, that didn't work for me, that didn't work for me. Every single time you get all those horrible symptoms, your body's trying to talk to you. Nothing is a coincidence. Everything.
Absolutely. I'm just loving it because, you know, the body is so wise and it can reveal so much about yourself. And same thing in Ayurveda, that we look to the body to reveal things internally that are going on so that we can do a self-assessment. And observing your period is a real thing. To have it align with the full moon, to see how connected you are to the rhythms of life and nature. And so it just kind of brings me to, you know, understanding the functions of female hormones, because I have no, other than my academic training with Ayurveda, the only training I've ever had when it comes to hormones in education was us learning of what happens in the changes of the body, but externally. Like we had patches of hair that would go on, you know, a life-size thing of a body. And I don't feel like we've come much far, you know, any further than that. And so please, I would love for you to share with us, you know, what are the functions of female hormones and why are they important to us?
Yeah, totally. I love that question. Funny enough, I feel like there was only education given like that to me as well. And it's like the most embarrassing stuff that you don't want to talk about. I remember my mom one day had purchased this book, and I came home from school and there's this book laying on my bed. I'm like, oh my God. And I threw it under my bed and I never looked at it ever again because I was so embarrassed. There was never like the full breakdown in like a comfortable space of this is what's going on. This is what's going to happen to your body. And this is what you should know. This is what you should pay attention to, because I literally get messages of women saying, I've had my period for 7 weeks. Is this normal? Is this normal? We're so convinced that every single symptom is normal just because them, their grandma, and their girlfriends have gotten it. No, none of these symptoms are normal. You are not designed to experience pain, but it is common. So understand the language. It is common for you to experience a lot of these things, but it is not normal. It's not something that you should be accepting at all. So we've got 3 main players that come down to the functions of your hormones. We've got estrogen, which everybody thinks is the bad guy, but we really do love estrogen. We want estrogen there because it's going to stimulate the tissue growth, like the development of breast and reproductive organs, and it ensures their function. The brain is going to boost the synthesis and the function of neurotransmitters that affect sleep, the memory, libido, cognitive functions as like learning and being able to have a long attention span. We want the estrogen. Now, it also decreases the perception of pain, preserves bone mass, increases HDL, the good cholesterol, and it also preserves the elasticity and moisture in the skin, dilates your blood vessels, prevents all this plaque formation on blood vessel walls. Like, we want this. And estrogen is going to slowly show up between your follicular and your ovulation phases. Those are your two phases that show up at the first part. So you have your period, and follicular, and then ovulation phase, luteal, and then your next period. So estrogen slowly rises, and we want this. It's going to make us feel really good, spicy. We're going to be feeling ourselves a little bit, but we don't want it to escalate so much to the point where we get all these symptoms 2 weeks before our cycle. We shouldn't feel bloated. We shouldn't see this acne. We shouldn't see any of the spotting. When you do, that is a sign, that is a symptom. Your body's trying to talk to you. Hey, that's something that you need to focus on. That's something that you need to support. And then we've got Queen P, which is progesterone. I love progesterone so much because she is everything to me. She shows up after and only after you ovulate. So if you're not ovulating, which is what birth control really stops us from doing, then progesterone is not going to show up. And progesterone is made primarily by the ovaries, the adrenal glands, the nerves, brain cells produce lesser amounts, but progesterone helps develop the functions of the female reproductive tract, the function of the breasts. In the brain, progesterone binds to certain receptors to exert the calming and sedating effect. It improves sleep, improves any protection against seizures. So just to recap that, progesterone basically makes you calmer. Progesterone is your natural chill pill. And when we are not ovulating from that rise of estrogen, we're not going to have the creation of progesterone. That's why so many women, especially on birth control, experience anxiety the week before their cycle because they don't have Queen P to calm them down. Yeah. It's something that this is kind of just to like come back to you saying that you're so aware to your nervous system, which is amazing. That's huge, but it's also so hormonal. Not just environmental, it is so hormonal, which means just like your environment, just like your hormones, you have way more control over your anxiety and your emotions than you've ever been led on to believe. Doctors are always saying, go on birth control. You're dealing with all this, or you're dealing with anxiety. You need to go into stress management. You need to go to therapy, which yes, there's going to be external stressors and the inner child triggers that are going to affect us, but those are going to always feel like a 20 out of 10 versus maybe like an 8 or a 6 or a 5 out of 10. If you don't have the progesterone, that shows up on scene to support that. Mm-hmm. And then we've got the beautiful, last but not least, the testosterone, and that is all manufactured in women by the ovaries and the adrenal glands. It enhances the libido, your sexual response. It strengthens your ligaments. It builds the muscle and the bone. It assists with your brain function. It makes you sharp, and it helps with any like assertive behavior and a sense of well-being. So that's why like during that ovulation phase and you're like feeling yourself, that's because like social skills are on point, your verbal skills are on point, because you've got the testosterone that is showing up to support everything that's going on with you. You've got the stamina, you've got restful sleep, so you can train harder and recover faster, most likely in that follicular ovulation phase when estrogen and testosterone show up, versus in the second half of your cycle when you've got the progesterone that kind of arrives on scene and everything starts to wane. So when all the hormones start to fall, no wonder why we can't train as hard No wonder why we suck at doing those HIIT workouts or those CrossFit workouts. The best time, if anything, during that luteal menstrual cycle, the week before your cycle and the week of your cycle, is to like slow things down, have more rest in your workouts, stop doing the total body workouts, maybe adjust to body split workouts, do a leg day, no cardio involved, do some Pilates, do some yoga, do some meditation work, focus on your orgasm game, help balance out the hormones. So those are all the functions of our three main key players that kind of like arrive on scene and fluctuate all throughout the 4 phases. That was a lot. Sorry, I can totally like go on a rant about this.
I'm here to listen, because you know what? It's really what I'm hearing you saying is ultimately us increasing our capacity to bring the body back into harmony and balance, you know? And so it's like that begins by taking our own health in our hands and educating and really becoming informants of like change and knowledge, which is exactly what you have done. And you know, it's been such a pleasure chatting about it, because there's no other better person to ask who's been through it, you know, who's actually experienced the changes in the body and living a lifestyle in which you have to perform, but then also going through changes. And so something is just 2 last questions I had to you to ask you, just about more clarity of when your hormones are kind of out of whack, you would say, what are some of the symptoms that women would be noticing, or that they could kind of observe if they possibly don't know what that would look like?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I'm going to break that down into 2 categories. So looking at your period, just period wise, that's going to be heavy bleeding, any brown spotting or brown blood that's showing up, light pink spotting, light periods, missing periods, irregular periods, and then even heavy blood clots. But then things that are non-hormonal is going, or things that are equivalent to just like regular, like day-to-day stuff that a lot of us don't think are hormonal. It's going to be the acne, the bloating, the constipation, which, just to put this out there, we should be having 2 to 3 bowel movements a day. For those who are questioning or even not even thinking about how many bowel movements, yes, you are constipated if you are not having 2 to 3 bowel movements. And yes, you are constipated if you are having coffee to have one. Dealing with weight loss resistance, so the acne, hair loss, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, any weight loss resistance are all things, even insomnia, hot flashes. These are all things that we don't really consider as period hormonal conditions. It's so funny. I will literally ask on Instagram, I'll do a poll, how many of you are experiencing period issues? And a lot of them will say none. But then I will ask them all this, and then they're like, oh, shoot, I am dealing with hormonal issues, period issues. And they say that they have great period. And then I was like, okay, well, what are your period symptoms? They're like, oh, my period comes every single 28 days. I'm like, okay, well, what are your symptoms? And then they start saying cramps or headaches. And they've so accepted that as normal.
Yes.
It blows my mind.
Yes. You know, I'm grateful that you have the period lab, and I'm sure after this, people are going to have multiple questions, you know, if they're facing any hormonal chaos in their life. Miranda, I wanted to ask you where people can reach you online right now, if you can share.
No, of course. So you can reach me on Instagram at Miranda Popen. We're slowly going to be changing our Instagram platform over to the Period Lab and really just dedicating it to all women. So in case you check me out, it might be either the Period Lab or Miranda Popen. And same thing for our website, mirandapopen.com or theperiodlab.com.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us this morning, Miranda. It has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you and just to listen to your story and have somebody who's a relatable source like yourself. And so thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thanks for having me.